Welcome to class. Today we are going to talk about varieties of language. And why there is a need to talk about variety of language? The fact is that we have so many nomenclature and names of the language we speak. We know them by virtue of variety of names. Are they different? Are these names stand for something different? Or are they represent the same thing? So do we have multiple names of the same thing? So you can say tongue, you can say language, you can say dialect, you say pidgin, you say creole, you say vernacular, and many other names. Are they same or different? Or are they related? Or are they different categories? This question arises because most of us confuse them from one with the other. And though we have already done a detailed discussion on each of these varieties, each of these names, the way we call them. But what I'm going to do today, I'm going to put them all in single lecture, and very briefly, we will not get into details of each of these, but I will tell you the crux, the brief explanation of these terms that we assign to different varieties. So be it language, be it dialect, be it sociolect, be it regional dialect, be it register, be it style, be it Lingua Franca, be it Pidgin, be it Creole. So a lot of names of, in quotes, the same thing. This is what we are going to do today. We are going to talk about varieties of language. If you look at Ferguson 1966, he did a linguistic classification of these varieties. And he assigns value in terms of prestige, denoted by P, and vitality, denoted by V. So if you have positive P and positive V, you can have negative P but positive V. You can have negative V but positive P. You can have both negative P and V, both are negative. So depending on these values, Ferguson 1966 classifies these varieties. Some of them are here, like vernacular. What is the vernacular? And you can see the P value, the prestige value of a vernacular is negative, low. However, the vitality, the expectancy or the potential of language to survive for a longer time, because a huge number of speakers speak it. So the vitality is positive. Prestige, it is lower on prestige but higher on vitality. And what is it? It is a non-standardized. In quotes, every time I use this term standard, I have reservation, because it's an artificially assigned value to a particular variety because of socio-cultural contexts and institutional decisions and support. Every dialect, every variety has the potential to become standard language. But the process of standardization is external to language. We assign this prestige value. In order to understand the process of standardization, you can watch the video on the same theme, and you can know in detail the process, how we go about standardizing a particular variety. So coming back to vernacular, it's a non-standardized native language of speakers of a speech community, and acquired at home as first language by young children. And because it is non-standardized, the domain of use is limited. It has low value in terms of prestige, however, high value in terms of vitality. The second variety is standard variety, standard language. And if you look at standard language, the prestige value is very high. At the same time, vitality value is very high. And the reason is that it has institutional support. It has a very elaborate domain of use. It is used in media, it is used in education, it is used in administration, supported by government agencies, used on formal occasions. So all kinds of support extended to it, and it gets a wide domain of use, and that is why it has a very high vitality and very high on prestige as well. So a standard variety or language is a variety of a speech community codified and standardized in dictionaries, grammars, thesaurus, and users manuals. So the whole set of resources are created to make it standard, uniform, and allow and assigned a very high prestige value to be used in all official occasions and supported by social and government institutions. Then look at classical language. Now, when we say classical language, as predicted, it will have high prestige value but negative vitality. And cases are where you may not have a fluent speaker of this language, but that's a variety classical language, like Sanskrit in India, right? Like Greek, classical Greek, Latin. So we do not have speakers, fluent speakers of these languages. These languages are not acquired as mother tongue, but they are language of our texts. They are language of rituals. So they are high on prestige, low on vitality. So they have prestige value positive, vitality value negative. Then we have pidgin. If you want to know more about pidgin, you watch the video on pidgin. What is pidgin? Pidgin is a language, a contact language, a hybrid language, and very restricted in grammatical character, which arises out of a sustained contact between two speech communities which have no language in common, and it is required for communication and exchanges and interaction. So it's a hybrid language with lexicons from one language, the words from one language, and simple grammar and structure from the other language. And this is how it's a negotiated variety between two speech communities who have no language common for interaction and mixing. So definitely it will have negative prestige value because nobody owns it as mother tongue, and it will have very negative vitality because it's not going to sustain for a long time. This variety, it has to change. And the extended pidgin is called Creole. So what is a Creole? When the extended pidgin, when the pidgin extends its use, domain of use and influence, the vocabulary of this variety becomes very rich. The communication function expands, and little social value assigned, prestige value assigned. And a time comes when the next generation starts acquiring it as mother tongue. And then that extended pidgin, which is acquired as mother tongue by next generation, is called Creole. So predictably, you will have, plus minus vitality. Why plus minus vitality? It will be negotiated and depends. Some of the Creoles still survive. because of trade, contact, and migration and colonial, outer. We have many European languages based creoles all over the world, English based creoles, French based creoles. So, if you want to understand Pidgin and Creole, you should watch the video that we did on Pidgin and Creole and birth of a new language. But this is the classification by Ferguson 66. So, you have vernacular, you have standard language, you have classical language, you have a Pidgin, you have a Creole, right? So, the varieties, because of the mobility and mixing of population throughout the history, we have instances of continuous language contact. So, this continuous long language contact, when the communities come in contact with each other, it does have influence in both the directions. So, both of the varieties which come in contact, both of the groups of speakers who come in contact, and this contact is sustained for a longer period of time, is going to have an effect and influence in both the directions. So, causes and effect of language contact, what happens? It may create language extinction and death because of shift into other language. So, it may result into language shift where the speakers of one language shift to another language, and subsequent generations start acquiring a new language as their mother tongue, and their original language is lost. So, they have shifted to another language because of migration and other socio-cultural reasons. What is language maintenance? Language maintenance in a contact situation where the community or the speakers try to maintain the language, the linguistic structures and cultural practices, and they also acquire the dominant or majority language in that case, but they also maintain their own language, the minority one. So, they become bilingual. Another cause and effect for contact is Pidgin, birth of a new code, linguistic code, which is very rudimentary in nature, very basic, and it fulfills a very basic communicative need. So, pigeons are born, pigeons are created. When these pigeons are extended because of their extended social functions, they fulfill a lot of other communication needs. The domain of influence expands. They are called extended pigeons, and an extended pigeon can be acquired as mother tongue by the next generation, coming generations, and that becomes a Creole. So, Creole is an extended pigeon acquired as mother tongue, right? And this is how a new language is created. It all starts with language contact, then rudimentary structure with very limited number of words and a very restricted communication function. But later on, gradually over a period of time, the vocabulary gets richer because of extended social functions of the language, of the code, and also sentences get complicated and longer. So, we have syntactic richness, we have lexical richness, extension in the social function, and extension in their domain of influence, that is called extended pidgin. This extended pidgin later on is acquired by subsequent generations as their mother tongue, and this is how a new code, a new language is born called Creole. Then, because of contact, we also have Lingua Franca. So, a variety or a code, any variety that serves as a tool for communication for people who speak varieties which are not mutually intelligible. So, they do not have any single code common. They are not mutually intelligible to each other. In that case, two things can happen: either pidgin is born, or a third language is used as a lingua franca, as a code to negotiate. So it's a negotiated linguistic code in a situation, social linguistic situation, where two communities or two groups of people meet and interact and sustain contact for a longer period of time without any language in common. So that variety is called lingua franca. And lingua franca, for example, English is lingua franca uh, in most of the regions where Hindi may not be there in India, right? English becomes lingua franca when we go and travel Europe. You may not know Spanish, you may not know French, you may not know German, but because you know English, it works as a lingua franca for you to go to tourist destinations in such locations in Europe. So lingua franca is a code or a language. Any language can be lingua franca in any social linguistic situation. It's not a typical different variety, but the function of a particular language, which is a negotiated acceptance between two communities or two sets of speakers where no language is common. English is lingua franca in some regions, French is lingua franca in some regions, Hindi is lingua franca in most part of the country. So when you go to northeast, go to Manipur, go to Arunachal, go to Mizoram, and even if you don't know English, you know Hindi becomes lingua franca. So Hindi is primarily located in north, but in south, in east and west, wherever you go, it becomes a lingua franca for those people who do not have any language in common. So this is what I was talking about. Swahili, for that matter, in many African nations like Tanzania and Zaire, is a lingua franca. English in several multilingual societies and tourist destinations, in scientific communities, in trade and commerce, English is lingua franca, right? Now, vernacular, we just talked about another variety, a non-standardized native language of a speech community, and there are four defining characteristics. I have listed 5, but one or two are overlapping, so don't go by the numbers, but these are the defining characteristics, like lack of codification and elaboration. Of course, if you recall what we discussed in our standardization process, selection, codification, right, elaboration, acceptance, 4 stages, right? So vernacular is a vernacular because it has not been standardized. So any language which is not standardized, right, and which is acquired as native language by a vast number of speakers is a vernacular. Okay, I don't call it non-standardized variety because this entire process of standardization is socio-political, right? So a language to be qualified as a standard or non-standard is all about socio-political support extended to a particular dialect or variety. It has nothing to do with, it has no linguistic basis. So that is why we should avoid using non-standard, the term non-standard, because every language is equally potential of becoming a standard. The only thing is that it's a historical development in the history of a language, or it is a political intervention, social intervention, where institutions and statutory bodies make deliberate attempt to standardize a particular code, particular dialect, and it becomes standard language. So a language which is spoken at your home, it has functional restrictions because it's not language of media, it's not language of print media, it's not language of texts. We hardly have printed resources. So that variety is called vernacular. However, you might have heard the term vernacular press, as opposed to, so vernacular press is a notion which is seen as in contrast with the standard press, where, for example, let's say Hindi press, English press, Tamil press, let's say they use standard varieties, and there are languages where we have like Mizoram, Mizo. So we have Mizo Delhis, right? So you have publications in Mizo. However, it is not scheduled language. Mizo is not scheduled, but we have a lot of media programs. We have a lot of radio broadcast. We have a lot of you know uh, journals and pamphlets and dailies which are published. So vernacular press. So this is an artificially assigned terminology. We shouldn't be confused with that. There's no linguistic basis of it. Then, of course, standard language, and let us go by Holmes' definition of it. So, standard variety is generally one which is written. Now, this is another, parameter how people judge it, which has undergone some degree of regularization or codification. For example, in grammar and dictionary, and it is recognized as prestigious variety of code by the community. That is standard language. It's all about the attitude of the community towards a particular language. They assign prestige value to it, and it becomes standard with certain codifications and modifications extended to it by statutory agencies. So, if you look at the process, how it happens, we have already talked in detail, but just quickly, selection. So, a particular dialect is selected. Codification. Then it is codified. Grammars are standardized, list of words and vocabulary and dictionaries are created, thesaurus are created. Then they take help of language experts, they create user's manual, the script is fixed. So things are standardized, right, and tailor-made. And then acceptance, where speech community accepts it as standard, and it is taught in schools, it becomes subject in the universities, and this is how a dialect becomes standard language. Now, very interchangeably used word, dialect and language, right? And we all have our own understanding. If you look at, if you go and ask any speaker, uh, which language do you speak? They'll name a particular, variety, a code. If you ask, is it a dialect or a language? Now here the confusion comes. And then what happens? It depends on the prestige value that the speaker assigns to that variety. And this is what exactly happens in our census data collection. So when the enumerators go, and specifically in North India, it's very prevalent where these enumerators go and the speaker, Bhojpuri speakers, Bajikai speakers, Braj speakers, Avadi speakers, Bundeli speakers, majority of them identify Hindi as their mother tongue. And we have more than 40 languages listed under Hindi as its dialect. Interesting. And you need to understand that Hindi is relatively a new language compared to, because if you look at the history of Bhojpuri, history of Avadi, history of Braj, Hindi has emerged out of Apabhransh, later part of it, history. But Hindi includes, because of the intelligibility, Hindi includes all these languages as its dialect. It's all about the attitude of the speaker towards the language, right? And we have done a very detailed discussion on language and dialect, but just a quick review here to make you understand. Uh, Dialect refers to the linguistic attitude and values that we assign to a particular variety. And this idea is socially and culturally, politically motivated. Otherwise, linguistically, there is no difference between language and dialect. If I am speaking English, I am speaking a particular dialect of English. So nobody speaks the language. We all speak a particular variety, a particular dialect. If you are speaking Tamil, which Tamil are we talking about? Right? If I speak Hindi, which Hindi I am talking about? Which variety of Hindi I am talking about? Right? So we all speak a dialect. Though we aspire to speak standard form of it, but we'll speak a dialect. We call it language because we assign high prestige value to what we speak. And if you want to understand the frames of references, how we judge a language and a dialect, there are three frameworks. Linguistic distance. So we need to see whether language A is closely related to standard variety. It may be closely related, it is a dialect. If it is distant, where the linguistic differences are more at the level of morphology, syntax, and usages, it's a distinct language, right? Uh, Dialects are also determined in terms of mutual intelligibility. So, if two varieties are mutually intelligible, even if they look so different, but if people understand each other, they are considered dialects of the same language, dialects of a language. And of course, socio-political factors where the prestige value is important. So what value the speaker assigns to a particular variety, the speaker will choose to call it a dialect or language, right? So there is hardly any difference. As a linguist, we don't distinguish. So regional dialects, the regional variety, right? Uh, the standard language and its variant spoken in a particular geographical location, like Madurai Tamil, Chennai Tamil. So Tamil, standard Tamil, and then we have varieties, differences, but they are mutually intelligible. But distinctions and differences can be seen. Madurai Tamil, a dialect, original dialect, Chennai Tamil, original dialect, or other parts of Tamil Nadu, right? Bhojpuri for that matter. Now, Bhojpuri is one language, but nobody speaks the Bhojpuri. Everybody speaks a variety of it. So, Nagpuriya, Purbi, depending on which location are we talking about, Angika for that matter. So, regional dialects are those dialects which are restricted to a particular region or geographical location. So, a variety of language which is restricted to a particular location is called, particular geographical region is called regional dialect. Then sociolect. So, within the same speech community, a particular social class speaks a particular, a particular variety, so same language, but with but some differences in terms of lexical choices, in terms of some syntactic structures, expressions. So that you find differences, and these differences are associated with a particular social class. Sociolect, right? Uh, then register. This is also a very widely used term. So, registers generally denote specific ways of speaking associated with particular profession and social group. So, it's not a distinct language, it is a variation which is restricted in a particular domain. So, I am speaking Hindi, but if I am giving a speech, right, let's say on any topic in physics, I'll be speaking Hindi, but I will use certain words which are not used in common everyday life, common expressions. So, a very niche and categorized expressions used in a particular profession. So, science has its own register, irrespective of the fact that I'm an English speaker, you are also an English speaker. But you do not speak English the way you speak in the streets, and the way you speak while giving lecture on quantum physics. So you'll be using a different set of jargon, technical words, expressions which are not commonly used, right? So you have religious registers, you have scientific registers, you have legal registers, you have commercial registers. You might have seen airport railway announcements; they're frozen. right? Similar announcement everywhere, all everywhere. Particular style, a particular set of words. And telephone as operators, call centers, the way they talk, they have their own register. So such professions and domains of use also determine what variety are you going to use of the same language. So that's not a dialect, that is not a different language. It is domain specific, a specific user-centric use of language called register. And then finally, style. Style refers to degree of formality, right? And you might have noticed when you talk to your friend, your style is different. When you talk to your father, your style is different. When you talk to a teacher in a classroom, your style is different. When you talk to the same teacher in a market, style is different. So, a style refers to degree of formality, the setting and occasion when you speak. So, when are you giving public lecture like our leaders, they're less formal. But when you are doing casual conversation with friends and family, very informal. But when we are making announcements in a public place, highly formal. If you are performing a religious ritual, highly formal. So, degree of formality determines your style. Is it formal? Is it informal? Is it highly formal? Is it less formal? Highly informal, less informal, casual. So, it is most often used to discuss difference in formality. So, these are some names associated with the variety we speak, the code we have, the language we speak, and they are all overlapping. And these distinctions in case of language, dialect, vernacular and standard are all uh, very categorical in the sense that standard language is not a linguistic term, right? We give this term standard language because the particular dialect has undergone some standardization process and a high prestige value is assigned. It gets institutional support. So it is not superior to any other dialect which is not standard. Language is not superior to vernacular. Dialect is not superior to vernacular. Dialect is not inferior to a standard language. It's all about how we assign a prestige value. Linguistically speaking, language, there is no difference between language and dialect. Linguistically speaking, there is no difference between vernacular and language. Any variety which is being acquired by a human child as mother tongue is a language. Now, if you call it a dialect, if you call it a vernacular, it is socio-political position that we take and prestige value that we assign. So, which is external to language. But if you look at purely linguistic point of view, language, dialect, vernacular, they are all the same. We all speak a dialect, right? A language becomes language because we assign certain external elements to it, like writing system. So, we believe that some languages which do not have a writing system are dialects. Some languages which do not have standard form and are not used in formal occasions are called vernaculars. So, these are all our socio-political positions that we take towards a particular language, and they all refer to linguistic attitude. So, this is it for now. We will continue our discussion with some more themes in our next class. Thank you very much.